All right, let's talk about ISOTeam. This is a company that has been on an absolute roller coaster. After getting slammed by the pandemic, they're now looking to make a comeback. And they're bringing in, well, drones. So is this a classic turnaround story in the making? Let's get into it.
Okay, so here's how we're going to break this down. First up, we'll get a handle on who ISOTeam is, what they actually do. Then we'll dive into their financials, which tell a pretty dramatic story. After that, we'll look ahead at what could drive their future, and yeah, that involves those drones and a huge pile of confirmed orders. We'll balance all that out with the risks and potential rewards, and then we'll wrap up by looking at the company from an environmental and social perspective.
So, first things first, before we can really talk about a turnaround, we need to know what the business is all about. What is it that ISOTeam actually does day to day?
Well, at its core, ISOTeam is a big deal in Singapore's building maintenance scene. We're talking over 20 years in the game. And they're not just any player, they are a dominant force in one specific area. They handle about 30% of all painting jobs for government public housing. That is a massive slice of a very, very stable pie.
Okay, now for the heart of the story, the money. And this really is a story. It's about a company hitting rock bottom during the pandemic and then clawing its way back. Let's trace how that all went down. So, the last few years have been a whirlwind. Back in 2020, COVID really did a number on their operations. That pain trickled down into a couple of really rough years financially, and their share price took a hit. But then, the tide started to turn. In mid-2023, they raised some money to get their finances in better shape, and by 2024, we started to see a real recovery in their numbers, which they topped off by announcing a new plan to share profits with investors.
And wow, this chart says it all, doesn't it? You can literally see that sharp drop in both their revenue and their core profit. But the key thing here is what happens next. That isn't just a little bounce. That is a classic V-shaped recovery, a really strong rebound, and the forecast is for that growth to continue.
And this isn't just about making more sales. It's about making profitable sales. Take a look at their gross margins. That's a huge indicator of profitability. They crashed to almost nothing in 2022. Why? Well, they were stuck working through some really low-margin jobs they'd signed on for before and during the pandemic. But as you can see, once those were done, their profitability started climbing right back up, heading towards much healthier levels.
All right, so that's the comeback story so far. But what about the future? Let's shift gears and look at what's supposed to power their growth from here. And it really boils down to two big things: a massive book of future work and some pretty cool new tech.
First, let's talk about the order book. This number right here, 186.5 million Singapore dollars, is huge. This isn't just a hopeful projection. This is confirmed, signed on the dotted line work that they already have lined up. It gives them a really clear view of revenue coming down the pike.
So what's making up that big number? Well, they just bagged over $30 million in new contracts, covering everything from design to landscaping to their core painting business. And the pipeline looks really solid. They're expecting to win even more work soon, all thanks to a steady flow of public projects in Singapore. It really looks like this momentum is here to stay for a while.
Now, beyond just winning more work, there's the tech side of things. ISOTeam is getting into using drones for painting and inspections. And look, this is not just a gimmick to look futuristic. An investment report is estimating that this could cut their costs by a massive 30 to 40%. In a business where labor is a major expense, that is a potential game changer.
And this isn't some pie-in-the-sky idea. They have a concrete plan to get this done. They're starting with a pilot project, then they'll test it on public housing later in 2026. If all goes well, the plan is to roll it out more widely. It shows they're being pretty methodical about this whole thing.
So we've got a great turnaround story and a little bit of a high-tech twist. But hey, as any investor will tell you, there's always two sides to the coin. So let's take a clear-eyed look at the potential upside here and the risks that could trip them up.
So, on one hand, the case for being optimistic is pretty clear. Their profit margins are getting better, it has all the makings of a classic turnaround, and of course, that drone tech could give them a huge advantage. But on the other hand, you have to consider the risks. What happens if labor or material costs spike? What if there are changes to labor regulations? And don't forget, they have to compete and bid for every single project they get. It's a tough business.
All right, these days, a company's story isn't just about the bottom line. So for our last section, let's look past the spreadsheets and check out the environmental, social, and government side of things. ESG, to get the complete picture.
So, the big question is, how are they doing in these areas? Is their focus only on making money, or are they also trying to be a responsible company?
You know, it's a bit of a mixed bag, but one that seems to be improving. On the plus side, they're doing good things for the environment, like installing solar panels. Socially, they've been bumping up benefits for their employees. But there is a mark on their record. Back in 2020, the Singapore Exchange put out a trade with caution alert on their stock because of some unusual trading. Now that's a serious flag for investors. The important thing to know, though, is that they have since put in extra compliance measures to address those concerns.
So, to tie this all together, ISOTeam is a really compelling story. You've got a company pulling itself back from the brink with a solid pipeline of work and some genuinely innovative technology. But all that potential is balanced by some very real risks, like rising costs and the fact that they still need to show that those past governance issues are well and truly in the rearview mirror.
This content is intended to serve strictly and only as an informational, independent, objective summary of recent events and should in no way be interpreted, construed, or relied upon by any party as inside information or financial advice.